Breakups can be painful. It all started with a harmless night out, or so they thought. A friendly game of pool turned into terror when a stranger slipped an AirTag into her purse and then circled her house with a knife in hand. Elsewhere, Kevin, a bartender, was jolted awake by a shadowy figure standing in his room. A knife, taken from his own kitchen, lay waiting, and then the intruder vanished. But the eeriest story of all? A silent couple who appeared out of nowhere, their unblinking stares locking onto the bartender. By the time he noticed them again, they weren't just watching, they were waiting. Breakups are never easy, even when they're the right decision. I was trying to piece my life together after ending a 2.5-year relationship with my boyfriend. It wasn't messy or dramatic. We had just grown apart. Still, it was tough. Memories of him seemed to linger everywhere, and sticking to the no-contact rule was excruciating. One of the things I missed the most was playing pool together. We were both decent players, but he had a knack for pulling off trick shots that amazed everyone. Whenever we went out, we'd find dive bars with pool tables, far from the chaos of college hangouts. Those dingy, dimly lit bars became our haven. A few weeks after the breakup, I felt particularly nostalgic. It was a quiet Wednesday, and none of my friends were available. Determined not to mope at home, I decided to visit one of our favorite bars. It wasn't about revisiting the past. I told myself I just needed a change of scenery. The bar was exactly as I remembered. Dim lighting, worn-out stools, and the comforting hum of an old jukebox. The familiarity hit me hard, but I forced myself to stay. After a few drinks, I wandered to a pool table, idly chalking a cue. That's when a guy about my age approached, asking if I was up for a game. Grateful for the distraction, I agreed. We played a few rounds, and while he wasn't as skilled as my ex, he wasn't terrible either. He even bought me a couple of drinks. He was friendly but not particularly sharp. Still, the casual conversation and the game helped me relax. After our fourth game, he unexpectedly asked if I wanted to go back to his place. The question caught me off guard. Trying to deflect playfully, I said something like, maybe after a second date. His demeanor shifted instantly. The friendly vibe vanished as he scowled and grabbed my wrist, muttering something about how much he had spent on drinks. Before I could react, he snatched my purse. Frozen in fear, I couldn't even scream. Luckily, two older men at the bar noticed and intervened. They confronted him, and after some muttered curses, he threw my purse on the table and stormed out. Shaken, I called an Uber and left. On the ride home, I tried to calm myself, even closing my eyes briefly. When I arrived, I rummaged through my bag for my keys and noticed a notification on my phone. AirTag found moving with you. My blood ran cold. Digging through my purse, I found the AirTag and crushed it under my foot, heart pounding as I realized what this meant. I rushed inside, locking every door and window. Later, as I tried to calm down in my bedroom, I noticed an old car driving past slowly. It circled the block multiple times, moving slower with each pass. On the last round, the driver's window was down, and I glimpsed a knife in his hand. Terrified, I stayed hidden until the car finally disappeared. The next morning, I told my parents, and my dad called a police officer friend for advice. Without a license plate number, there wasn't much they could do, but I was told to report any sightings immediately. Though I haven't seen the car since, the fear of being watched hasn't left me. The nightmare feels far from over. I'm Kevin, a bartender at a high-end rooftop lounge that caters to the kind of clientele who think regular bars are beneath them. It's a stark contrast to my own life. I live in a modest neighborhood, far from the luxury I serve every night. Still, the job has its perks, great tips, and a steady flow of customers that keeps things interesting. Friday nights are always the busiest. The lounge fills up with groups of friends celebrating, couples on date nights, and the occasional loner looking to feel important. I've been at this job long enough to read people by the way they order drinks. Those who ask for elaborate cocktails are trying to impress someone. The whiskey-neat types are unwinding from a long day. That night, amidst the usual bustle, someone walked in who immediately stood out. He looked furious, his jaw clenched, and his scowl practically etched into his face. His unkempt black hair and stained leather jacket made him seem wildly out of place. He marched straight to the bar, but didn't sit. Instead, he stood there, glaring at me. His hostility was palpable, and I wondered how he had slipped past the doorman. Keeping my tone neutral, I asked if he wanted a drink. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at me like he was sizing me up. Finally, he muttered, "Double shot of Jaeger." Jägermeister wasn't a typical request at a place like this, but I poured the drink without comment. When I came back to charge him, he crumpled some cash onto the counter. That alone was unusual. Most patrons here use cards. As I moved on to the next customer, his voice stopped me cold. "I knew I'd find you here, Kevin," he said. The words hit me like a punch. I froze, staring at him. "How do you know my name?" I demanded, my voice low but firm. He didn't answer. His glare didn't waver as he muttered, "I know what you did." Before I could react, he turned and walked toward the elevators. I was left standing there, reeling. I didn't recognize him, and his cryptic words made no sense. The encounter ruined my night. When my shift finally ended, I drove home, the man's words playing over and over in my head. I couldn't recall anything I'd done that would provoke such a confrontation. Later that night, I woke up abruptly. At first, I wasn't sure why. My room was silent and dark, but something felt wrong. Keeping still, I let my eyes adjust to the shadows. That's when I saw it, a dark figure standing in the corner by the door. My heart pounded as I realized someone was in my room. I stayed motionless, pretending to be asleep, while my mind raced for a plan. Finally, I counted silently to 3 and launched myself out of bed, screaming. The figure bolted for the door. I chased him through the house, but stopped at the front door, now wide open. Whoever it was had vanished into the night. As I turned back, I noticed something on the floor of my bedroom. A knife. It was from my own kitchen. The realization made me sick. Whoever had been in my room had likely intended to hurt or kill. I called the police immediately. They arrived quickly, searching the house and yard, but found no signs of forced entry. The doors had been locked, and the windows were intact. Somehow, he had gotten in unnoticed. The police took a description of the man and pulled security footage from the bar, but so far, they haven't found him. I haven't seen him since, but I sleep with a bat by my bed now, and every creak of the house sets me on edge. To this day, I have no idea who he was, how he got into my house, or what he thought I had done. I work as a bartender in a bustling bar and restaurant just outside Baltimore. It's a unique setup. There are no waiters, just bartenders like me, along with cooks in the back. Customers order everything, including food, at the bar. Once it's ready, they grab it themselves. It's a fast-paced job which I enjoy. The crowd is usually lively, with great music and plenty of energy. The constant flow of customers makes the shifts fly by. That particular night started like any other weekend shift. Chaotic and noisy, with college students crowding the bar and downing tequila shots like water. Amid the frenzy, an elderly couple walked in and sat at a corner booth. They seemed out of place among the rowdy, younger crowd, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. The bar was slammed, and I was busy pouring drinks and taking orders. About an hour later, I glanced back at the couple. They were still sitting there, but something felt off. They hadn't ordered anything. No food, no drinks, nothing. They just sat motionless, staring at the wall. At first, I thought they might be waiting for someone or unaware of the self-service setup. But the longer I looked, the stranger it seemed. They weren't even looking at each other, just fixated on the wall like statues. When I finally had a moment to spare, I decided to check on them. Putting on my most polite smile, I approached their table and asked if they wanted to order anything. The woman didn't react at all. She remained still, her gaze locked on the wall. The man, however, slowly turned his head toward me. His movements were unnervingly deliberate, almost mechanical. When his face came into view, I felt a chill run down my spine. His skin was pale and deeply wrinkled, and his eyes seemed sunken into his face. He didn't say a word, just shook his head once in a firm but silent gesture. Something about his expression made my stomach twist. I muttered a quick, awkward response and hurried back to the bar, my heart racing. The whole encounter left me deeply unsettled. As the night wore on, I avoided looking at the booth. But when things slowed down, curiosity got the better of me. I glanced back at them and froze. Both of them were staring directly at me now, their eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. I tried to look away, but the intensity of their gazes held me in place. Finally, I forced myself to turn back to my work, pretending to be busy. When I mustered the courage to look again, the booth was empty. Relief washed over me. They were gone, and I could focus on closing up. Later that night, as I wiped down the bar with my coworker Karen, I asked her if she'd noticed the strange couple. Karen looked confused and shook her head. She said she hadn't seen anyone like that. Then, in her usual no-nonsense tone, she rattled off a list of people she'd served that night, along with details about what they'd ordered. Her precision unnerved me. How could she recall so much, but completely miss the couple in the booth? By the time we locked up, I started doubting myself. Had I imagined them? As I walked to my car, the night took a darker turn. Across the street, under a dim streetlight, stood two shadowy figures. My breath caught as I realized it was them, the same couple from the bar. They didn't move, just stood there staring at me. Panic surged through me, and I jumped into my car, locking the doors. Without a second glance, I sped out of the parking lot, my heart racing. The drive home was a blur. My mind spun with questions I couldn't answer. Were they even real? Or had I just imagined the entire encounter? I've never seen them again, but I can't shake the eerie feeling they left behind. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever get answers, but deep down, I hope I don't. If you're enjoying these terrifying tales, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a creepy story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Also, let me know in the comments which story scared you the most.